Things just got even more heated as the United States just asked Canada to place tariffs on China. What makes this interesting is the fact that China seems to be winning on every side. Even with this current threat of new tariffs, China is in a good position to partner with a lot of US allies as Europe and Canada begin to distance themselves from the Trump government. Where do all these lead to? Let's discuss it in detail, but first, please subscribe to our channel so we can continue to break down global news for you. The United States, led by President Donald Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, is pushing hard to reshape trade across North America. The latest move in this strategy is pressuring Canada to slap tariffs on Chinese goods, following in the footsteps of Mexico. The big idea behind this is to build what some are calling a Fortress North America, a united front to challenge China, America's top economic rival. The Trump administration wants to lock out cheap Chinese products from the region, forcing Canada and Mexico to rely more on pricier American-made goods. It's a bold plan, but it's already stirring up trouble, and the downsides are starting to pile up. The US views tariffs as a powerful tool with two main benefits. First, they generate revenue for the government. Experts estimate that a 10% tariff on all global imports could bring in $1.5 trillion over a decade, cash the US could use to fund projects or reduce taxes. Second, tariffs act like a big stick, bending other countries to America's will. By hitting Canada and Mexico with 25% tariffs on their exports to the US and doubling tariffs on Chinese goods to 20%. As of March 4, 2025, Trump is sending a clear message: play by our rules or pay the price. The hope is that Canada will cave and tax Chinese imports too, completing the Fortress North America vision where the US, Canada, and Mexico stand together against China's economic might. But this approach is far from perfect, and the cracks are showing. For one, these tariffs are hitting American wallets hard. Canada and Mexico are the US's biggest trading partners, with over $1.6 trillion in goods flowing between them in 2023 alone. Now, with 25% tariffs in place, everyday items like Canadian lumber, Mexican avocados, and auto parts are getting more expensive. Economists from TD Economics warn that US car prices could jump by $3,000 on average because parts cross borders multiple times during production. That's a tough pill to swallow when new cars already cost nearly $49,000. Shoppers are feeling the pinch too. Grocery bills are climbing as Mexican produce like tomatoes and berries face higher costs. Then there's the retaliation. Canada and Mexico aren't sitting quietly. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has already promised 25% tariffs on $155 billion worth of US goods, starting with $20.6 billion right away. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum is cooking up her own Plan B with tariffs targeting Trump-friendly states like Iowa and Wisconsin, hitting American farmers with losses on soybeans and pork. Posts on X show a growing Buy Canadian movement, with Canadians boycotting US products. This tit-for-tat trade war risks choking supply chains that have tied North America together for decades under deals like the USMCA. The National Homebuilders Association predicts that construction costs could rise by $3 billion to $4 billion, making homes even less affordable. The downsides don't stop there. Trump's push is straining ties with allies at a time when unity could be key against China. The Bank of Canada's Governor Tiff Macklem has warned that these tariffs could permanently cripple Canada's economy, slashing exports and growth.
This time, if tariffs are long-lasting and broad-based, there won't be a bounce back.
Mexico's GDP could shrink by up to 4%, according to some estimates, as its factories lose US buyers. Meanwhile, China's getting off lighter with just a 20% tariff bump. Ironic when it's the main target. Experts at the Atlantic Council point out that this uneven approach might backfire, letting China slip through the cracks while North America fights among itself. American businesses are bracing for chaos too. The auto industry, which depends on parts from all three countries, is in a panic. General Motors has already hinted at moving truck production out of Mexico and Canada, which could mean job losses or higher costs passed on to buyers. Farmers, still stinging from China's retaliatory tariffs in Trump's first term, fear a repeat. Back then, soybean exports tanked, and the U.S. had to spend billions bailing out rural America. History could rhyme again, with taxpayers footing the bill. Trump's Fortress North America dream might sound strong on paper, but it's shaking the foundations of a system that's worked for years. Higher prices, broken alliances, and economic fallout are real risks. Chinese imports to North America have exploded over the years, jumping from less than $200 billion annually 2 decades ago to over $700 billion today. This surge has been fueled by China's ability to offer cheap goods, keeping prices low and helping fight inflation across the continent. But the U.S. sees this as a threat to its own industries and wants Canada and Mexico to become captive markets, places that buy mostly American-made products, even if they cost more than Chinese alternatives. Canada faces a high-stakes dilemma: give in to Trump's demands or risk economic turmoil. His 25% tariffs on Canadian goods sent shockwaves through the economy, sinking the Canadian dollar from 1.36 to 1.37 overnight. With 75% of exports, over $450 billion in 2023, going to the U.S., losing that trade lifeline could be devastating. The Bank of Canada warns GDP could shrink by 3.6%, triggering layoffs, closures, and a potential recession. If Canada caves and taxes Chinese imports, the pain shifts inward. China supplies $60 billion in goods annually, from electronics to machinery. Tariffs would raise costs for manufacturers, hitting Ontario's auto plants and British Columbia's tech firms. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce warns industrial output could shrink by 2%, while inflation, recently tamed at 2%, could spike past 3% per TD Economics. Worse, relying more on U.S. suppliers would lock Canada into Trump's Fortress America, limiting trade options. Rejecting Trump's demand isn't much better. Those tariffs would hammer exports like Alberta's oil and Quebec's lumber, wiping out billions. North Dakota, which imports 79% of its goods from Canada, shows how deeply integrated the economies are. Yet Trump's plan ignores this reality. Either choice is a losing game. Saying yes means short-term pain and long-term U.S. dominance. Saying no risks an economic nosedive. Trump's tariffs expose how vulnerable Canada is to America's shifting policies, leaving little room to maneuver. A high-stakes minerals deal between the U.S. and Ukraine, once seen as a game-changer in Washington's trade war with China, has collapsed in dramatic fashion. President Donald Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had banked on tapping Ukraine's lithium, uranium, and titanium reserves to reduce reliance on Chinese imports. But after a heated 45-minute White House showdown, Trump berated Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and abruptly threw him out, turning a strategic opportunity into a diplomatic disaster. The fallout has left Trump's trade ambitions in tatters and raised serious doubts about his strong-arm tactics. The breakdown wasn't just a failure, it was a spectacle. Reports say Trump accused Zelensky of undermining the deal by refusing to hand over Ukraine's mineral revenues without firm U.S. security guarantees against Russia. Zelensky, already fighting for his country's survival, pushed back, unwilling to be a pawn in Trump's economic playbook without concrete assurances. The standoff ended with Trump storming out, aid scrambling, and Zelensky returning to Kyiv empty-handed. Social media exploded, calling it a masterclass in burning bridges. Trump's transactional approach backfired spectacularly. His demand that Ukraine prioritize U.S. profits over its own survival made failure inevitable. The Kiel Institute estimates the U.S. has sent $119 billion in aid, far short of the $500 billion Trump demanded in mineral rights. Critics, including former Ukrainian Minister Timofey Milovanov, slammed the deal as exploitative, arguing it threatened Ukraine's sovereignty. Now, with relations frayed, the U.S. risks losing influence in Eastern Europe, while Russia watches with satisfaction. Even if the deal hadn't imploded, its value was shaky from the start. Trump hyped Ukraine's mineral wealth at $10 to $15 trillion, tossing around names like lithium, uranium, and titanium. But the US Geological Survey throws cold water on that, suggesting the numbers are more hype than reality. China dominates the world's rare earth reserves with 44 million tons, followed by Vietnam, Brazil, and Russia. Ukraine barely registers on the list. Experts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies caution that while Ukraine does have mineral deposits, their true value remains largely unverified. The widely cited $10 trillion estimate? More of a guess, built on outdated Soviet-era data and optimistic projections rather than concrete evidence. The practical problems pile up fast. Even if Ukraine had big reserves, getting them out would take decades or centuries. Mining is slow and expensive. Building a mine and processing plant can cost $500 million to $1 billion and take 18 years on average per CSIS. Ukraine's infrastructure is wrecked from war, and Russian-controlled regions like Donbass might hold the best deposits anyway, making access a pipe dream. Trump's team pitched this as a quick fix to challenge China's 90% grip on rare earth processing, but analysts at Politico call it a fantasy. The US would have sunk billions into a war zone with no guarantee of payoff, all while China keeps churning out minerals. Trump's approach here has a dark side too. It overestimated the prize and underestimated the mess. Now the US might walk away from Ukraine altogether, especially if American surveys, like those from the US Geological Survey, keep debunking Ukraine's overhyped mineral claims. Trump isn't giving up on rare earths, though. With China controlling 90% of global processing, he's sniffing around for other sources. Russia, holding 10 million tons of rare earths, might dangle its resources as a bargaining chip, especially if Trump keeps cozying up to Moscow to end the Ukraine war. That's a risky move. The actions of the US president have effectively cut the US from Europe and Canada, as Europe is scrambling to form a coalition to back Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky after his dramatic clash with US President Donald Trump. Over the weekend, leaders like the UK's Keir Starmer, France's Emmanuel Macron, and the EU's Ursula von der Leyen voiced strong support, promising a coalition of the willing to defend Ukraine and secure peace. Potentially with European troops. The move aims to fill the gap left by a US that's stepping back under Trump's leadership. But while this coalition sounds bold, its realism is shaky, and the tension it's exposing between Europe and the US could play right into China's hands. Starmer hosted President Zelensky in London on March 2nd, pushing a 4-point plan. More military aid, Ukraine's voice in peace talks, stronger defenses against Russia, and a coalition to enforce any truce. Leaders from Germany, Poland, Spain, and beyond flooded social media with solidarity messages. Von der Leyen called Zelensky's dignity a symbol of Ukrainian bravery, while Macron bluntly labeled Russia the aggressor. The coalition's ambition is big, but its feasibility is questionable. Europe's heart is in it. Countries like Sweden, Poland, and the Baltic states see Ukraine's fight as their own security buffer against Russia. Yet the continent's muscle doesn't fully match the rhetoric. NATO's chief, Mark Rutte, dodged questions about replacing US aid, which has been Ukraine's lifeline. $175 billion since 2022, dwarfing Europe's share. The Washington Post highlights Europe's struggle to arm Kyiv alone. Weapons stocks are thin after years of underfunding defense. Germany's government just collapsed, France's is shaky, and Hungary's Viktor Orban is openly pro-Trump, praising him for standing bravely for peace. A unified Europe sounds nice, but cracks are glaring. Diverging interests and tight budgets could hobble this effort. China's playing both sides already. It's Russia's top trade partner, buying a record amount of oil and gas in 2023 and 2024, yet it's kept a low profile on Ukraine to avoid Western anger. Now with Europe and the US at odds, China can step in as a neutral broker, or a quiet winner. New partnerships could bloom, say energy deals with Germany or tech ties with France, while China keeps Russia in its orbit. This meltdown perfectly captures the chaos of Trump's trade war strategy. Strong-arm tactics, high-stakes bluffs, and a deal that was doomed from the start. He's flexing America's power, accusing Zelensky of betrayal over a plan that never really added up, while the world watches to see what's next. Will Canada cave? Will Russia seize the moment? What do you think? Is Trump's rare earth gamble a masterstroke or just another misfire? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.